A gust swept through Fort Silver. A knit cap lifted slowly softly like a hand had peeled it from her head. When it hit the dirt, the formation froze. No helmet, no hair, just pale skin, jagged scars like memory had tried to erase her piece by piece. Someone whispered, "What the hell?" Then came Huxley's voice slicing through the silence. "What is this, a hospice with rifles?" A few recruits chuckled. Then silence again. Emma didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't move. She stood there stone still, gaze locked on something far beyond the field. And in that breathless quiet, every soldier knew. The one without hair wasn't weak. The weak one was the first to laugh. But the silence didn't last. Huxley's smirk faded when no one joined him. No more laughter. Just the wind and the sound of boots shifting awkwardly in the dirt. Emma still hadn't moved. She didn't look down at the cap, didn't look at Huxley. But one recruit, Keller, was staring at her a little differently now. His eyes traced the back of her neck. There, just beneath her short collar, barely visible beneath the sunburnt skin, was a faded tattoo. E9. 2 characters. No flourish, no meaning to most, but something about it felt deliberate, like a code, or a label someone wanted to forget. Keller leaned slightly toward the recruit beside him. "You ever seen that unit tag before?" he whispered. The other shook his head. No one had. But the number had stuck, just like the silence. And that's when the rumors started again. After that morning, no one looked at her the same. People still followed orders, still trained, still moved. But something had shifted. And it wasn't just the missing hair, it was the way Emma walked. Like she had done this all before. Every drill, every push-up, every weapon rotation, like muscle memory, not learning. She didn't need reminders, she never needed correction, and she never raised her voice, which in a place built on noise and commands was the strangest thing of all. Even the instructors kept their distance. Someone said she once disarmed a live grenade without flinching. Another claimed she served in a Black Ops unit that never made it into the files. She doesn't eat with anyone. Doesn't sleep much either. Saw her outside at 0400, just sitting, watching the trees. It wasn't fear, not yet, but it was something close, something colder. No one said it out loud. But everyone knew Staff Sergeant Emma Whitaker didn't act like she was new here. She acted like she never left. They never asked her where she came from, not out loud. But in the bunks in the hallways near the mess line, whispers moved faster than orders. "She's too old to be here, not for this squad." Didn't see her name on the deployment board. No intro, no file photo, just appeared. Some thought she transferred from Intel. Others were sure she was some kind of punishment dropped the military's version of a quiet exile. But then someone said she wasn't listed anywhere. No assignment history, no paper trail. Maybe she's not supposed to be here, or maybe we're not supposed to know why she is. And still, Emma never explained. Not when she was passed over for lunch, not when Huxley made another cheap joke, not when a recruit tripped during drills and cursed her name loud enough to echo across the field. She just kept moving. That kind of quiet, the kind that doesn't flinch, doesn't ask, doesn't care. You don't question it. You just feel it. And the longer she stayed, the heavier it became. If there was one thing she cared about more than her boots, more than her gear, it was that hat. The same gray knit cap that had flown off her head that morning, the one that now lived folded in her locker or sitting neatly beside her tray in the mess hall. No one dared touch it again after that first day, not even Huxley. But Keller noticed something strange. Every evening, right after lights out, Emma would take it out, wash it by hand. No soap, just water. Slow, careful motions like she wasn't washing fabric, like she was washing memory. She'd press it dry in an old towel, then hang it from the same corner of her bunk, always the same spot, like it was meant to face something no one else could see. And once, just once, Keller swore he heard her say, almost too soft to believe, "Still warm." Just like you kept it. No one asked who she meant. No one had to. Because the way she treated that hat, it wasn't just clothing. It was a ritual, a tether, a grave. For 3 days, she said nothing. Not even when her name was skipped at roll call. On day 4, a rookie cracked asking how she stayed so calm. Her reply was 7 words. Silence keeps you alive. Words get you seen. That night, nobody joked. Nobody whispered. Even Huxley kept his mouth shut. Something about the way Emma had looked at Reed, not angry, not proud, just calm, like she'd seen this all before. After lights out, the barracks went quiet. Just the steady hum of the vent fans and the weight of everyone trying not to think too hard. Keller, in his bunk near the end, couldn't sleep. He'd been watching Emma's bunk out of the corner of his eye for days. That night she lay still, hands crossed over her chest, eyes shut. Almost too still. But just past 0200 she moved. Not much, just a twitch. Then a sound, barely a breath, almost a whisper. "Don't stop. Keep walking. If I go under, you don't turn back." Keller sat up. He didn't mean to listen, but how do you not? Emma's lips kept moving. 12 more miles? 1 more hill? Don't let go. I've got you. Then silence. Stillness. She never woke, and the next morning she didn't look at anyone any differently. But Keller did. Because now he knew she had been somewhere no one else had. And she had brought part of it back with her, even if it only spoke while she slept. The next day was routine. Drills, sweat, marching lines, and shouted orders. Then came the psych eval. Standard rotation. Each recruit filed through a small room with a screen and a set of images used to monitor stress instinct, emotional reaction. Most people blinked at the sound of gunfire, flinched at blood, laughed at the weird ones, clowns, spiders, open water. But Emma. She didn't flinch at all, until the 7th slide. It wasn't violent, wasn't graphic. It was just a photo, a snowy trail, old boot prints, one set of drag marks in the snow stretching far into the trees. And in that split second, Keller saw it. She blinked, not fast, not startled, more like her body remembered something her mind was still holding back. But the photo stayed on screen. Emma's jaw tightened just slightly. She said nothing. When the instructor marked her sheet, she stood, nodded, and left the room. But Keller leaned closer, peering at the image one more time. And he wondered, was she dragging someone out? Or being dragged herself? Some people know when to stop. Huxley wasn't one of them. Ever since the cap incident, his jabs had gone quiet but not away. And after the psych drill, he decided it was time to try again. Emma was wiping down a training dummy, hands wrapped, silent as always. So Whitaker Huxley called, "How'd you ace that psych test? Bet that snowpick brought back memories, huh?" She didn't answer. He stepped closer, voice louder. "Or maybe you don't have any. Maybe the military just shaved your head, threw a few scars on you, and sent you here to scare us straight." A few recruits shifted. Keller stared at the ground. Emma paused, just for a moment. Then she turned, slowly looked at Huxley, but not like he expected. No glare, no anger, just disappointment. And in some strange way that hit harder than a punch. "You say things," she said quietly, "like you've never had to carry anything but your own voice." Then she walked off, leaving Huxley standing there alone with the silence he finally felt. After that, no one said much for a while, not even Huxley. Something about the way Emma looked at him, not with anger, not even judgment, just that quiet kind of weight only people who've buried more than they've bragged about ever carry. And maybe that would have been the end of it, if he hadn't kept pushing. But before he got the chance, someone else showed up. That afternoon during weapons drill, a black SUV rolled up near the edge of the range, windows tinted, engine quiet. Nobody was supposed to be out there. When the door opened, every recruit straightened because the man who stepped out wasn't just another officer. He didn't wear rank loud, didn't bark commands, but his boots hit the dirt like thunder. General Thomas Barkley. He walked slow, arms behind his back, watching the drill like it was a chess game, like he already knew where every piece would fall. And when his eyes landed on Emma, he didn't blink. She didn't salute, didn't even shift her stance. She just nodded, and for a half-second he nodded back. Nobody understood what that meant. But Keller, watching from the end of the line, felt it in his stomach, whatever game was being played. It just changed. That night, Keller couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the way General Barkley looked at Emma, not like a superior looks at a soldier, but like someone who's seen a ghost and didn't flinch. It wasn't just respect, it was recognition, and that stuck. So when the barracks emptied for evening chow, Keller stayed back. He wasn't snooping, not really. He just wanted to understand. Emma's bunk was neat, always was, but something caught his eye. Folded cloth, frayed edges, stuffed beneath her mattress like it was half forgotten and half guarded. He hesitated, then carefully pulled it out. It was a hand-stitched map, old, worn, and detailed markings in ink along a mountain ridge, jagged lines that looked like elevation paths. But it was the symbols that froze him. 9 red dots, 1 white, and next to the white one, 2 letters, E9. He didn't understand the terrain, didn't need to. because the meaning was clear enough. 9 people. 1 came back. And for the first time, Keller realized maybe that number on her neck wasn't a unit. Maybe it was a graveyard. The next morning was warmer, drills moved faster, sweat came quicker, but something about the air still felt heavy. Maybe it was the map still burned into Keller's thoughts. Maybe it was the way Emma hadn't said a word but somehow seemed louder than ever. Midway through the day, during the pull-up rotation, Emma stepped forward quiet as always. She gripped the bar, pulled herself up, slow, steady, clean. But on her 3rd rep, her shirt lifted. Just an inch. But it was enough. Across her right side, from lower ribs to her hip, ran a scar like a thunderbolt. Not clean, not surgical. Jagged, thick, old. The kind that doesn't come from training accidents. Someone near the front. Carter caught a glimpse and stopped mid-count. No one said a word. But the silence shifted. It wasn't just about the missing hair anymore. Or the tattoo. Or the way she never blinked. This was different. This was real. This was what war leaves behind when no one's watching. And for the first time, some of them didn't see a soldier out of place. They saw someone who had survived something they couldn't even name. Respect doesn't come easy in places like Fort Silver. It doesn't come with rank. Doesn't come with scars. It comes with silence. Earned. And lately Emma had been earning it. Not by asking. Just by existing. But not everyone was ready to give it. Huxley, especially. He'd been quiet. Too quiet. And sometimes silence isn't discipline. It's pressure waiting to break. So when the squad rotated out for night drills and Emma's bunk was left empty, he made a move. Nothing big. Nothing loud. Just a stupid, petty decision. He took her cap. The one she washed every night. The one that hadn't left her side since day 1. And he hid it. Shoved it behind the water tank out back where the dirt turned to rust and no one ever looked. No one saw him do it, but Keller noticed it missing. And when Emma returned, walked straight to her bunk and reached for the space where it always waited, her hand landed on nothing. She paused. Just a second. No sigh, no words. She simply sat down, hands resting in her lap, eyes fixed on the far wall. Still. And in that stillness, every recruit felt something shift. Because when someone like Emma doesn't react, you start wondering what's coming next. The next morning, the unit assembled as usual. Boots in lines, eyes forward. But something was off. Emma stood at the end. Same posture, but the cap was still gone, and somehow that absence spoke louder than anything. Then the jeep rolled in. Slow, dust trailing behind. General Barkley. This time he didn't stay on the hill. He walked straight onto the field, hands behind his back, eyes scanning the line. No one dared move. He stopped in front of Huxley. Didn't look at him. Just paused. Then turned to the whole group. You ever hear of Echo 9 silence? Someone near the middle shuffled. Barkley nodded like he expected that. Didn't think so. He turned slightly, just enough for his voice to carry. Echo 9 was a recon team dropped into the Ashfall Divide. 7 operatives, 2 weeks behind enemy grid. No evac, no air cover, no margin for error. His eyes landed quietly, unflinchingly on Emma. One came back. The line didn't move, didn't breathe. Then he spoke again, quieter this time. Slower. The one who dragged 2 bodies through 30 miles of snow. Who stopped bleeding only long enough to keep someone else alive. Who stitched her own leg shut using wire from a blown-out comms pack. He stepped closer to the line. They called her Echo 9. She never asked for it. She earned it. No one looked at Emma. Not out of disrespect, but because now looking felt wrong. And for the first time even Huxley couldn't meet her eyes, because suddenly every word he'd said felt 2 inches tall. Barkley stood still for a moment. Let the silence sink in. No one dared shift. Not after hearing that name, Echo 9. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then his voice cut through the air, quiet, sharp in that way only generals could manage. What do you think she came back for? No one answered. He wasn't looking at anyone in particular. Maybe that made it worse. You think she came for glory, for medals, for pity? He took a slow step forward. She had her out. Could have left with honors, could have never set foot in uniform again, and no one would have questioned it. Another step. Now he was in front of Reed the youngest, the one who'd stumbled on day 2. But she didn't. She came back here, to stand in the dust with kids who mock what they don't understand. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. She didn't come to talk about what she saw. She came to make sure you never have to. Behind him, Emma still hadn't moved. didn't blink, didn't flinch. But the recruits, they were shifting now, because for the first time they realized the silence they thought was weakness was protection. Protection for them, for what they didn't know yet, and maybe never would. Later that evening, the sun dropped behind Fort Silver's training yard. Long shadows crept across the concrete. Dinner came and went. No one talked much, and Emma, like always, sat alone. But something had changed. You could feel it, like the weight in the room had shifted to her side and no one was brave enough to try and balance it. After lights out, when most had turned in, Emma stepped out quietly. She walked to the far side of the range, the forgotten edge behind the water tank. No one told her. No one needed to. She crouched, slowly, reached between rusted pipes and old leaves. She found it. Folded. Untouched. No anger. No triumph. Just a breath. And her hand tightening around it. And that was enough. Because sometimes finding what you lost doesn't mean you have to wear it again. The next morning started like all the rest. Until the alarm went off. Not the morning bell. The red one. Emergency drill. Code Fireline Alpha. Which meant full gear no prep 10-minute deployment. Simulated breach. Fog bombs. Live comm interference. Panic by design. The recruits scrambled. Boots slammed. Packs dropped. Some shouted, others froze. Carter knocked over a barricade. Reed dropped his radio and couldn't get it back on. Chaos. And in the middle of it, Emma didn't yell. She just moved. Fast. Controlled. Measured. She pulled Reed's cord, reset the radio with 2 taps. Kicked Carter's weapon back into his hands without even stopping. Pointed twice left, then forward. They followed. Automatically. Without question. By the time the others were still fumbling, her fire team had breached the checkpoint simulation 2 full minutes ahead of protocol. And when the smoke cleared, General Barkley stood near the edge of the range, arms folded. Watching. Emma didn't look at him. She just adjusted her strap and walked back to the line. No salute, no words. But the other recruits, they were already turning toward her, waiting, watching, following. That night, the air in the barracks felt different. It wasn't just respect now. It was something closer to reverence. Reed lay awake longer than usual, staring at the metal slats above his bunk, replay after replay of Emma in the fog. The way she moved like she'd been there before. He didn't mean to speak, but the words slipped out soft, almost like a whisper to himself. What happened to your unit silence? Then the creak of footsteps. Slow, barefoot. Emma stood near the bunk. She didn't sit, didn't lean. Just stood there, not angry, not cold, just present, and finally, her voice. We went in with 9, a pause, long enough to make Reed's throat go dry. The last one to die asked me not to stop, so I didn't. She looked down at him, eyes steady, voice even. That's all you need to know, and more than most ever hear. Then she turned, walked back to her bed, and laid down facing the wall. Reed didn't speak again, not out of fear. But because he finally understood her story wasn't his to carry. But her silence was something he could respect. Huxley hadn't said much since the fireline drill. He still barked during PT, still cracked jokes under his breath, still walked like his boots were a size too big for his ego. But something had changed. You could see it in his grip, a little too tight on the dumbbells, in the way he stared at the horizon too long after formation dismissed. He was thinking, and for Huxley, that was dangerous. That night, while the others ate in the mess, he sat outside, alone, staring at the rifle rack like it owed him an answer. Keller passed by, nodded. Huxley didn't nod back. He just muttered, "She thinks she's better than us." But there was no fire behind it. Not anger, just noise. A second later, he stood too fast, kicked the dirt. Something snapped in his voice. She didn't even do anything special. She didn't die. That's it, right? But no one argued. No one agreed either, because everyone could feel it. He wasn't mad at Emma. He was mad that he couldn't look at her without seeing everything he wasn't. The next day, the field training shifted. Rugged terrain, minimal gear, 0 GPS. Just a map, a compass, and a target point 5 miles through forested ground, split into 2 fire teams. Emma stood with her usual calm. Then, without ceremony, she handed the folded map to Huxley. Just like that. "You lead this one," she said. "Not a test, not a trap, just a choice." The team blinked. Even Keller looked sideways like he hadn't heard right. But Emma didn't flinch, didn't explain, didn't soften it, just pointed toward the tree line. "You're up front. I'll cover rear." and then she fell silent again. Huxley hesitated. He could have laughed it off, made a show of it, but he didn't. He took the map, hands steadier than he expected, jaw tight but not clenched. They moved into the woods, step by step through uneven trail and shadows, Emma behind, watching, not judging, just there. And for the first time, Huxley wasn't performing. He was navigating. Not just the trail, but something else entirely, something heavier than the pack on his back. An hour into the march, the sun disappeared behind heavy clouds. The forest turned darker, quieter. Branches cracked under boots. Breathing got shorter. Nobody talked. Then a shout. Carter, mid-column. His ankle slipped on loose shale. The sound it made sharp fast wrong. He went down hard. Rolled once. Didn't get back up. Everyone froze. All eyes turned to the rear to where Emma usually gave orders, but she didn't say a word, because this time it wasn't her call. All eyes turned to Huxley, and for a second he looked like a kid caught without a playbook, but then something shifted in him. He dropped his pack, kneeled by Carter, checked the angle of the joint, the bruising, the pressure point. Not broken, he said. Swollen bad. Needs to get off it. At first he froze. His eyes darted to Emma like asking for help, but she didn't move, didn't even blink. That's when something clicked. Then he stood. Fast, clear. They made it back before sunset. Carter limped but upright. Reed looked like he'd aged a year. Even Keller kept glancing back at Huxley like trying to figure out when that guy showed up. Back at the barracks, gear was dropped. Sweat dried. Voices returned to normal, except one voice never came. Emma. She hadn't said a word since they got back, but just as Huxley was unbuckling his pack, he turned, and she was there. Not looming, not stiff, just there. She looked at him for half a second longer than usual, then handed him a small water canteen. Her voice was even. You did what needed to be done. Huxley opened his mouth, closed it again, then nodded. Guess I learned from the best. Emma didn't smile, didn't correct him. She just looked him in the eye. You stopped talking. That's when you started leading. Then she walked away, boots light on the concrete, back into the quiet she always chose. And Huxley. He didn't feel victorious, didn't feel like a hero, but for the first time he didn't feel like the loudest one in the room had to be right, and somehow that was enough. By the end of the second week, the final assessment was posted. Night recon, live simulation. 4-mile approach. 2 objectives, 1. Silent extraction. No rehearsals, no resets. Teams were assigned by number not rank, and that's how it happened. Huxley, Keller, Carter, Reed, all under Emma's command. There were no protests, no nervous jokes, just the sound of Velcro straps tightening and quiet glances exchanged. Before heading out, Emma stood in front of them. She didn't pace, didn't carry a clipboard, didn't ask if they were ready. She just said, "This isn't about being fast, it's about getting everyone home." That was it. And then they moved. Into the woods, into the dark, into silence. It wasn't like the earlier drills. There were no barked orders, no timed pushes, just hand signals, eye contact, and the kind of trust you don't ask for, you earn it step by step, and the team, they followed. Not because they were told, but because something in her presence made every shortcut feel wrong. This time, they weren't being led. They were choosing to follow. They were halfway through the route, crawling low beneath tree cover, breath timed with footfall. No words, just rhythm. Then a crack. Loud. Too loud. Someone had stepped wrong. Loose bark under Carter's heel. It echoed like a gunshot in the hush. Everyone froze. Eyes wide, chests tight. Then Emma moved. Not fast, not loud, just low and smooth hand signal slicing through the dark like a blade. Fist closed, hold position. She reached into her vest, pulled a small mirror, angled it low, catching light from the tree line ahead. No movement. No shadows shifting. Still, she waited. 10 full seconds. No one dared breathe. Then only then did she signal again. Left ridge. Single file. 2 steps apart. They moved. And none of them ever stepped that loud again. They saw it ahead. The green flare. Extraction zone. Just past the ridgeline. 15 yards, maybe 20. Reed exhaled finally. Keller cracked a half smile. Even Huxley glanced back at Emma, waiting for the signal, but she didn't give it. Instead, her hand rose. Flat, firm, stop. No one moved. She crouched, eyes scanning the tree line. Not panicked, just focused like she was reading the wind itself. Then she whispered barely audible, "No birds." The team looked around. She was right. No chirps, no rustle, just a silence too perfect to be natural. She reached for her sidearm. Not drawn, just ready. New route. 5 yards back. We go around. No one questioned her, because by now they knew Emma didn't hesitate for no reason. She hesitated for those who couldn't afford to. They circled wide, quiet steps over damp leaves, eyes flicking between shadows. Then Keller saw it first. Just past the original path, a tripwire, barely a thread, tied low between two roots. It led to a motion sensor wired into a set of flares and a sonic alarm. Not lethal, but loud enough to fail the mission, loud enough to say you didn't pay attention. Reed exhaled slow. "They set that up for us?" Emma didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her eyes stayed on the wire, then lifted slowly to meet Huxley's. He said nothing, but nodded once. The kind of nod that says, "Now I understand." They moved again. This time, every boot landed lighter, because now they weren't just following Emma, they were learning to see like her. They reached the real extraction zone 12 minutes later. No flares, no traps. Just a single Humvee idling in the clearing. Standing beside it, Colonel Briggs, hard-lined, steel-gray uniform, the kind of man whose silence had weight. He didn't greet them, didn't ask for names, just scanned the squad with eyes that had seen too much. Then he asked flat, steady, "Noted." He paused just long enough to let something shift behind his eyes. Most don't see that trap in time, and that was it. Because in that moment, respect didn't need ceremony. It just needed truth. Back at Fort Silver, the mess hall hummed like always. Trays clattered, boots scuffed tile, forks scraped metal, but one thing had changed. At the back table, the one tucked near the vending machines, Emma Whitaker usually sat alone. She didn't mind, didn't expect company, didn't need it. That night she took her tray, walked the same path, sat at the same seat. Then, without a word, Huxley grabbed his tray and sat across from her. Next came Keller, then Reed, then Carter. No one asked, no one invited. Just quiet footsteps and the soft sound of chairs sliding back. And Emma. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. But she didn't eat alone. Not anymore. Because sometimes respect doesn't show up in applause, it shows up in who chooses to sit with you. They were halfway through dinner. Forks moved slower. Conversation still soft. Then Keller, quietest of them all, glanced at Emma, cleared his throat once. "Ma'am, can I ask something?" She didn't look up. "You just did," she said. A few chuckled gently. He tried again. "The beanie. Why do you always wear it?" For a moment the table stilled. Emma set down her fork, lifted her gaze, steady, calm. "You ever lose something that kept you human?" "Hair didn't come back, but I didn't need it to." No one spoke. Lost most of it after the second run. Doctors said it might grow back. It didn't. She picked up her fork again. Didn't need it to. No pity, no dramatics. Just the truth. Worn like a second skin. And in that moment they didn't see what she'd lost. They saw what she carried. That night, long after lights out, the wind picked up again. Not harsh, just steady. The kind that carried memory. In the corner of her bunk, Emma sat reading by a dim desk lamp. On the shelf above her bed, a small folded beanie. Washed. Worn. Still holding shape. She looked at it for a long second, then reached up, but not to wear it. Just to set it aside. The door creaked open. Huxley leaned in, not entering. "Tomorrow's run. We start at 0500. Emma nodded. "Make sure no one's late." He smiled. "They won't be." As he left, Emma looked back at the folded beanie, then turned off the light. Darkness settled, but for the first time since she returned, it didn't feel heavy. She never picked up the hat again, because she didn't need it anymore. And neither did they. The end.